Good Shabbos, everyone. My friends, as we continue to recover from October 7th, one question many have been asking me, and how is it, Rabbi, that 1,200 of our people could be murdered, over 240 taken hostage, and afterwards, more people hate us? We lost 1,200 Jewish souls, massacred in the most brutal and barbaric way possible, and too many people have turned against us. You would think it would be the opposite, but the signs are everywhere. The head of the FBI said recently that anti-Semitism is at historic levels. The ADL recently reported a 400% increase in Jew hatred. And headlines across the world read protesters call for Israel's elimination. And watch any video of protesters yelling, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." They don't mean a prosperous Jewish state. When they say from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, they mean genocide against the Jewish people. These are not protesters chanting and marching with nobility. They're haters, screaming in a frenzy of fury, an anti-Semitic fury that is threatening and intimidating. You could see a good example from a few weeks ago with wild protesters at the gates of the White House. The rage was frightening. And no wonder so many Jewish college students are feeling unsafe. Jew hatred across college campuses has become epidemic. What is happening on our college campuses is a good example of the rise in anti-Semitism we're all feeling, and one I want to focus in on this morning, and one that affects all of our precious children, happening at universities that we may hope our children will attend one day. The examples are endless. At Columbia University, 144 members of the faculty signed an open letter that called Israel an apartheid state while referring to Hamas's terrorist attacks as legitimate military action. One university professor said he found it exhilarating that Israelis were tortured, and another saying that it never actually happened. Neither was fired from their positions. More and more school administrators from Stanford to Penn, from Cornell to Harvard, looked the other way when students and outsiders aggressively marched through campus, interrupt memorial vigils for Israel, and threaten and even assault pro-Israel Jewish students, and cheer for the October 7th massacre, and even wish for future ones, while tearing down pictures of hostages. My daughter attends William and Mary in Virginia. My friend Rabbi Gary Litt is here this morning, is an uncle of our bar mitzvah. And he knows that William and Mary, it's been fairly good. There's a nice Jewish community there. But yet my daughter has felt some of this anti-Semitism that we are all feeling. When she was a freshman at William and Mary, she was given a peer advisor, an older student. That peer advisor was a Muslim student, and she and Noah had become friends. And after October 7th, my daughter posted things on her social media supporting Israel. The next day, she received the following text from this peer advisor. She wrote to my daughter, "I don't want to be friends with you anymore because you support the Israeli government and the Zionist regime that's been terrorizing and continues to terrorize and commit genocide and ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. It was so disrespectful of you, Noah, not to include the Palestinians in your mourning. I want to point out that it's not a religious conflict. Rather, it's about human rights. And anyone like you who supports or recognizes Israel in any way is supportive of genocide and terrorism." She cut off all contacts with my daughter and no longer agrees to serve as my daughter's peer advisor. And later that same weekend, while she was sitting in front of her sorority house eating dinner with friends, someone she had never seen before on campus came up and yelled at her, "Free Palestine." And I know you're on social media texting your friends about Israel. He disappeared. But of course, it's the last thing I want to hear as a father. And whether it's my own daughter or any of our Beth Yeshurun children, or your own children or grandchildren, or other Jewish students that you may know, I know you're all feeling the pain that too many of them are going through at this time. How is it possible that our precious children on college campuses throughout this country, too many of them are feeling an uptick in anti-Semitism when it should be the opposite? How is it possible? Aren't our colleges, especially some of our elite universities, supposed to be campus safe zones where hatred of any student is not to be tolerated? How could young people who generally consider themselves to be accepting be so vicious in their views on Israel and treatment of fellow Jewish students? It's a serious moment for the American university. And it might shock us, but maybe what's happening in our campuses shouldn't surprise us. Because elite universities in particular have been consumed in recent years by the notion that the world could be seen simply as a race-based identity hierarchy of oppressors and oppressed. They're taught this simplistic view, this hip new take on an ideology entrenched in universities really for decades, and one that has spread beyond them and into the media, corporate America, and American political life. This false ideology argues that the West and the values that built the civilization, Western civilization, that has given unlimited prosperity and freedom to so many, they claim that Western civilization is stained indelibly by racism and imperialism. And they falsely claim that American Jews who are alleged to be all white, or even hyper white, as their story goes, are on the oppressor side of the ledger. They claim that our alleged whiteness combined with our alleged imperialism in Israel to justify the claim that Jewish presence in Israel is settler colonialism. So we become the worst of all villains, which maybe should come as no surprise to anyone who knows history. And so we arrive, my friends, step by rotten step, at the ideas and behaviors on display on too many campuses today, where the mass killing of Jews in Israel is celebrated as an act of resistance or just military action against occupiers by the so-called indigenous population. Too many campus activists showed little compassion for Israeli men and women who were murdered because they were perceived as settlers and hence worthy of extermination. Instead, too many college activists cheer on Hamas as an anti-colonialist, freedom-fighting regime, even though we know that Hamas is a theocratic, genocidal terrorist force that oppresses minorities, women, LGBTQ people, and revels in the massacres of innocents. Many progressives have the gall to call for an immediate ceasefire, denying Israel the right to defend itself, to free our hostages. In this twisted logic, Jews can never be genuine victims. Israelis should never be mourned, even when they're being murdered and kidnapped. Facts don't matter, including the fact that Israel, the restoration of our people's ancient homeland, was created as a refuge from centuries of attacks just like those perpetrated by Hamas terrorists. American universities were supposed to exist to give students the conceptual tools to understand the world, to make decisions for themselves, to understand the complexity of history. But it appears that at too many universities, especially our elite ones, students are instead being fed simplistic ideological categories that blind them to reality. Of course, you can't paint a complex, centuries-old challenge of the Middle East conflict as a fight between the oppressed and oppressors. But viewing this world through this distorting prism, Israel is always guilty, no matter what, and the Palestinians are forever innocent, no matter what. And as a result, the October 7th massacres were considered exhilarating, joyous, justified. All this is as depressing as it is frightening. And now that we have an understanding of why this is happening, is there anything you and I can do as Jews and as our friends, as people that really understand what is happening? Can we do anything? Over the centuries, we Jews have always survived against all those who tried to destroy us. And now, as those on the extreme left are after us, is there anything we can do? In the fall of 1943, European Jews, as you know, were being murdered by the hour. So the true story is that 400 rabbis marched on Washington, D.C. They planned to meet President Roosevelt at the White House. The least the president could do was listen to these rabbis, to their pleas to use whatever means possible to save the Jews of Europe. They approached the White House on October 6, 1943. But President Roosevelt could not be bothered. Instead, the president decided to leave early for a vacation. There was no meeting. There was nothing the rabbis could do. In the 1940s, American Jews lacked the influence to save 6 million of their brothers and sisters. No one listened to them. If Jews had had a national voice, perhaps the doors of the great American nation may have been opened to our fellow Jews seeking asylum. Thank God times have changed, because since World War II, we as American Jews decided we could never, ever be so defenseless again. This past Tuesday, I flew with hundreds of fellow Houstonians to Washington, D.C. to participate in the largest rally ever put on by the American Jewish community. I saw with my own eyes 300,000 fellow Jews and friends of Israel peacefully demand the release of hostages, a continued fight for Israel, and a renewed struggle against anti-Semitism. We listened to the highest-ranking officials from Congress, top Republicans and top Democrats. I saw Jews, Orthodox, conservative, Reform, secular, come together in solidarity and prayer. It was something I will never forget, and it reminded me that working together, we can make a difference. The great Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel once said, "The opposite of goodness isn't evil. The opposite of goodness is silence." Today is not a time for silence. The one choice that is not acceptable during this difficult time is to do nothing. The Jew haters of our day and age, they're coming after us no matter where we live, no matter where we side politically, no matter where our children may go to college. Can we fight them with everything we have? Because God forbid their ideology, their false ideology, continues to grow and has a chance of becoming even something bigger and larger than it already is. Can we hold all academics, professors, and university heads accountable for their actions or lack of actions? Because let us never believe that the hate for Israel is just about Israel, but they're okay with us as American Jews. Because if we know anything about our world today, an anti-Zionist is an anti-Semite. Or in the words of Judea Pearl, father of martyred journalist Daniel Pearl, who once said, "Anti-Semitism targets Jews as individuals, but anti-Zionism targets Jews as a people." Can we insist that university heads treat anti-Semitism with the same seriousness as other forms of hatred? Because all forms of discrimination should be treated with the same attention and vigilance. If certain universities don't change, let us consider not sending our children to their campuses. Because there are many universities who've stood up against anti-Semitism, done the right thing. Let us choose those schools where our precious children can be safe. Let us demand that the universities where our children do attend protect our children. One start, we demand the universities defund and deauthorize campus groups who violate student codes of conduct, who legitimize and glorify violence, anti-Semitism, even terrorism. Two perfect examples are Students for Justice in Palestine, or the horrific Just Jewish Voices for Peace, organizations that call for genocide and call for anti-Semitism, even from these organizations that's allowed to be on campuses, too many today. If a particular university doesn't take action, and we are involved with the university as a parent or grandparent or alumni, let us consider stopping our giving. And let us even consider returning our diplomas. One of my friends, one of our members who grew up here, Jesse Rubenfeld, he's a former graduate of Penn. And he shared with me a letter he recently wrote to Penn. He told the university, "I'm embarrassed as an alum of Penn. You haven't done enough to protect other Jewish students, to call on anti-Semitism. So I'm returning my framed diploma with a $1 donation." Consider it. Can we be proud displaying those diplomas on our walls if our alma mater has not done enough to speak out against anti-Semitism? Let us consider resigning from any boards that we may serve on. Recently, one powerful donor from Columbia University wrote, "I'm quitting the board of Columbia Business School because, as Abraham Lincoln famously said, to sit by silence when they should protest makes cowards of men." The entire Columbia University and administration has failed to take a strong stance condemning Hamas, an organization whose very charter plainly states its goal to annihilate the state of Israel and Jews worldwide. With blatantly anti-Jewish student groups and professors allowed to operate with complete impunity, it sends a clear and distressing message that Jews are not just unwelcome, but also unsafe on campus. Thereby, I am disassociating myself and my donations from Columbia University. A few weeks after his letter was written, Columbia finally suspended its local chapter of Students for Justice in Palestine and Jewish Voices for Peace. Yes, we can make a difference, each and every one of us. Shabbat Shalom.